Hi love bugs, welcome back to my channel. So I know it's a full week into the new year, but I'm very excited to be talking to you guys about my best and worst of 2024. I think last year I did this kind of like compliment sandwich style where I did a book I loved and a book I didn't like. I just kind of alternated, so I think we're going to do that again. But first, something special. I made myself a little reading wrapped on Canva. So it's just like a shitty like Canva template, but I think it's fun. So I think that we can go through like my stats for the year, and then I'll do my best and worst reviews in the second part of the video. So there'll be chapters if you don't care about my stats, but you know, I think it's fun. I think it's fun. So my 2024 reading wrapped. I read 79 books this year, which is 32 more than last year. I was very surprised. I did really well this year. Don't know what happened, but I was getting through it. So I see videos of people who did like 200 books. I saw this one that was like a girl who read like 600 books this year. That will never be me. But I'm very proud of 79 books. I think that's great. My goal for this year is 50 books, and if I accomplish that, I will feel very good. So that's where I'm at with that. Yeah, I feel great about that. My top author, I thought this slide was so ugly, and then I realized that my top author was going to be Euripides, and now I think it's really funny. So my top author was Euripides. I read 4 of their books this year. This is because of school, I'll say. I don't want to give too much personal information, but I had to read a couple of his plays for school, and I logged those into my reading list. I'm pro logging your school books into your Goodreads. I think that's fine. And I guess side note, not to derail this immediately, I know a lot of people are switching away from Goodreads, and I want to know our take on that. Like, what's the best alternative? What are you guys going to be using this year? Because I agree about not supporting Amazon, but I've also seen some bad stuff about Fable recently. So I'm feeling maybe Storygraph, but let me know what you guys think. My top genre was literary fiction. I read 19 literary fiction books, and then after that, 14 fantasy books, 11 nonfiction books, 11 horror books, and 10 poetry books. I think that I also included a lot of drama in poetry. My top vibes, you can tell I was getting really lazy with my wrapped now because it's just a screenshot of my spreadsheet, but we can look at it. My top vibe was emotional, and my second top vibe was contemplative, followed by dark and informative. I did read a lot of nonfiction this year, so I think that's where those come from. My lowest vibe was fun, so I read books from all around the world, including 14 countries across 5 continents, and my most visited country was America, naturally, because, you know, that's where I'm from, that's where I get the most recommendations from. But that is something that I want to expand upon next year. I also keep track of like my diversity and like how many countries I'm doing, what percentage of the books that I'm reading are from American authors, what percentage of the books that I'm reading are from white authors, and that is something I like always feel like I'm doing better at than I am. I'm still at about 59.5% American, which is like okay, but I really want to expand my horizons and kind of see books from more countries from around the world. And finally, I DNF'd 5 books this year, and that was 6% of my reading. Let's see what I DNF'd. I DNF'd a couple of books because I just didn't care about what was happening, and that was really my primary reason for DNFing them this year. It's just that I didn't care about them. I DNF'd this one like memoir that I felt really bad about DNFing, but it was just because I like didn't care. My average rating was a 3.67. I think that's pretty good. A 3.7 is like, you know, that's out of 5. That's very good, I think. It's like a 75%. And so I do have more books that I liked that I want to talk about than I have books that I didn't like that I want to talk about. And a lot of books that I really liked, I've already talked about in my Q1 wrap up from last year, so I'm not going to talk about them again because I don't want to, but there are many books that I really liked that I read in that quarter. Just a couple of honorable mentions that I think I talk about all of these in the previous video. Dowry of Blood, Song of Solomon, Pandora's Jar, The Deep, The Yellow Wallpaper, Earthlings, even though it was really weird, and Dark Air, which actually I have heard that the author of Dark Air has another series that people like, so let me know if you also like it because I'm thinking about reading it. Dark Air was a 5-star read for me, and as I don't want to be disappointed by anything else that the author writes, so if you recommend it to me, I will read it, but if you don't, I will not. The first book that I really liked this year was The Picture of the Artist as the Young Man by James Joyce. I don't think I talked about this in my Q1 wrap-up, maybe I did, but okay, I read this book. I started this kind of effort to be reading books from more countries. I'd really like to be able to say that I've read a book from every country in the world. I think that would be fun. So James Joyce was, of course, Ireland. And I really enjoyed this book, but it was difficult. Like, I think that James Joyce is considered to be one of the most difficult English language authors to read. And it's just the way that he writes is so interesting and so unique. He really treats it almost in a way kind of like poetry, where he's using a lot of very conceptual tactics and he's not just delivering it like a straight narrative all the time. So yeah, I really like this book. It does in the beginning. It starts off when the character, the artist, is a very young child. And so this is the most difficult part of the book, I think, for me at least, because it is a little bit disjointed. The narrative kind of cuts off at points and the narrator will go to a different topic. He doesn't totally understand everything that's happening, and that is reflected in the way that the book is written. So it really does come across as if it's being written by a kid of this age, and that's confusing. But it definitely gets a lot easier to read by the time you get to the end, where the artist is an adult and he has a name. His name is Stephen. Yeah, and this book is also just like packed full of references, which I think is another thing that makes it kind of difficult. I had a little tab for myself to show where the notes section starts, and it's just like this much of the book is just like book footnotes. And every chapter, there's 5 chapters. Every one of them I think there's 5. Yeah. Every one of them has more than 100 footnotes, and it's like I was flipping back and forth a lot just to understand all the references that he makes. I don't know a whole lot about Irish history or like Catholicism and stuff, so I was having to look back and check on what those things mean, but I really did enjoy that, and I think that I learned a lot because of it, because I was having to like look back at what something meant and like what the reference was. I actually did learn a lot about Ireland and saints and stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I recommend it, but approach it slowly. Take your time with it. I really liked it. It kind of forces your brain to read it. It's one of those books that kind of like teaches you how to read itself. And I thought that was really interesting. So, Portrait of the Artist by James Joyce. A book that disappointed me, which I do not have physically because I borrowed it from the library, which is going to be a common theme with most of these, is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. I talked about how much I loved A Dowry of Blood in my Q1 wrap-up video. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was very well written. I was really invested in the character and the atmosphere of the book, and An Education in Malice just like completely fell flat for me, and I was really excited about it because it's a Carmilla retelling. It's set in this like dark academia poetry setting, and you know, maybe that's where it went wrong. Maybe it was trying to do a little bit too much with the Carmilla retelling, but you know, I wasn't able to really fully get into it. I thought that it was a little bit weird that it was in this dark academia setting. It felt a little bit like, I don't know, just like hopping on a trend a little bit. And I just wasn't really into it. I have read the original Carmilla, and I like that a lot more. And I think that this book just didn't really totally capture the vibe that I wanted it to. I gave this 2.5 stars, the 2.5 of indifference, because I didn't think it was bad. I didn't hate it. It just didn't do anything for me, and I was disappointed by it. And it has a dual narrative that I just didn't think really added anything to it. We go back and forth between Laura and Camilla's perspective, and I just didn't think that really did anything. Their voices weren't extremely different, and I didn't feel like it added anything to the story. I didn't feel a large sense of tension, even whenever bad things were happening. It just kind of seemed like the characters didn't really care that much. It's also like, I think that you kind of put yourself in a bad situation whenever you write a character who's a poetry prodigy, and then you include their poetry in the book. And so I'm reading this girl's poetry. She's like this, masterful poet. She's such a prodigy. She's so great at poetry. And then you read the poem and you're like, oh, yeah. Not to be. I have two nonfiction books that I really like, so I'm just gonna group them together. I don't have either of them with me. I actually listened to them both on audiobook from Libby. I love my Libby app. I read most of my books through my Libby app. But I really like to listen to nonfiction on audiobook, especially whenever the author is the narrator. First book was Julia Fox's memoir, Down the Drain. This was also narrated by her. It was absolutely crazy, the things that she went through and the things that she was talking about and how young she was when so much of it happened. And it was just really well done, really well written. And I'm always impressed by celebrity memoirs when they're really well written. But yeah, and her reading the audiobook I think was really powerful, and it was just a really, really great read. I was really excited to read it whenever I could, or to listen to it whenever I could. Yeah, and then the second book was Armageddon by Bart Ehrman. And this is like a deep dive into the Book of Revelation by this biblical scholar, and he's coming to it from a point of Christianity comes to it with a lot of respect, I think, and is talking about like just going through the Book of Revelations, breaking down all of the historical references and kind of contextualizing it in the period that it was written and in the belief system that it was written towards, like who the audience was, what was going on in the world at the time, in the region where the author was from. And I really loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a really interesting breakdown. I only gave it 4.25 stars in my spreadsheet, so I don't remember what I took off points for, but something bothered me. And I didn't write down what, so it's anybody's guess. You can read the book and let me know what you think. But I thought it was really interesting. I really do like theology, though. I really like looking at religious texts, I guess in general, and like breaking them down as works of literature and works of history. I think that's super interesting, so I was really into this book. And both of these were really great nonfiction reads. On the other hand, another book that I didn't like, I should have grouped these two together because now it just sounds like I'm harping on S.T. Gibson. I was also disappointed by Evocation by S.T. Gibson, which is, I think, new. I think it was new this year. It's about this, like, secret society of magic people, and it's an all-male society, which is gay. Sorry, that was a joke. I liked the main character. Oh, the whole thing is that like the main character has this soul deal with the devil that one of his other relatives made that like gets passed on to the heir of the family, and like whenever they reach a certain age, and like he's reaching that age and doesn't have any kids, so it has to be him. And I really like that premise. I love a Faustian bargain. I love a deal with the devil plot line. But I just like didn't vibe with it. And also we find this out like very late into the book, and like all of this kind of drama around that comes very late in the book, and I just wasn't really, so like for a lot of it I was like, what are we doing, and by the time we get to it, it's like, I know that your soul is being claimed by the devil or whatever the fuck, because that's in the description of the book, so like why is it coming so late? But I liked the main character. I liked all the characters, actually. I thought they were a little bit annoying, but I did like them, and I like their relationship as it develops, no spoilers. I'm really sick of romance book pet names wherever the man is calling the woman little something. So like in this book, the husband was calling the wife little goddess, and it's like, why does she have to be little? Why does she have to be small? It's just so like I think it's like, it's cute, okay? It's cute. I'll attest. I'll back down. It's cute, okay? I don't hate it. And I think that in real life it would be cute, but it's like, why is every single romantic relationship in books, why is that their pet name is little blank? Happens in every romance book that I've read, I feel like, and a lot of the non-romance books that I've read. And it's just, I would like a little bit of originality. If he just called her goddess, I'd be like, wow, that's a real man right there. But why she gotta be little? You know what I mean? It just feels infantilizing. It feels childish. It feels like something you would call a kid. And it's cute. Like, I get it. It's cute. I get it, guys. I'm also a girl. Like, I get it. It just irks me a little bit. Anyway, a book that I really liked. Really liked the book Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. It's about this girl, this like young woman who is starting a job in Silicon Valley, and she's also, I guess, like one of the major like kind of artsy parts of this book is that she's being followed around by this black hole. It's kind of just like a metaphor for depression, like as she's feeling different ways and as things happen to her, the black hole either expands or gets smaller, representing her mental state. But I really liked this book. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a like kind of this entry into the workforce kind of book. And I really liked that representation of this like young adulthood, early corporate life, early career, just being so like dead and stale and monotonous. And I did read a couple of the negative reviews for this book on Goodreads, and I was like, you do have a point. You guys do make good points. I still liked it though. I liked the book. I had fun reading it, and so I'm not gonna like change my answer, but I do see a lot of very valid criticism for this book. Mostly that it's like not original or like not it's like trying a little bit too hard with the whole like black hole thing, and it's like, yeah, I can see that, but a lot of people don't try hard enough. Yeah, so I liked that book. I understand why people didn't like that book. Moving on. And this is my fault, but I really didn't like Diavola. It's a book about this family who goes on an Italian vacation in a haunted house, and they're being haunted by this entity that lives in the house. And our main character is this woman who is kind of a black sheep in the family. She doesn't have kids, and that's a major issue. And you know, as much as I do vibe with the black sheep of the family, childless woman kind of character, I didn't really like this girly. I just don't really love haunting horror. I don't really like ghosts and like poltergeist and things like that in horror. It's just not the branch of horror that I really enjoy. Don't really vibe with this branch of horror. I think that it was kind of predictable, and you know, it's one of those things where like you watch a dumb horror movie and you're like yelling at the TV to the characters to not do something because obviously the ghost is gonna jump out at them or whatever. That's kind of how I felt this entire book. Anyway, but you know, if you really like haunting horror, if you really like ghosts and creatures that are haunting, like you'll probably enjoy this book. You really probably will, but it's just not my thing. Another book I really liked was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I read this book in just like a day over the summer when I didn't have anything to do. I really enjoyed this book. It's about this woman who is a failing author, and she's friends with this other woman who is a very successful author. And one day they go back to her apartment, and the very successful author chokes to death and dies, like while they're celebrating, while they're eating. And so while she's there, before she calls the police, the unsuccessful author, our main character, I forgot her name, June, Yeah, June. Our main character, June, sees a completed manuscript on her desk and decides to steal it. And a major issue with that, aside from the whole stealing the manuscript thing, is that the author who had just died was Asian. June, our main character, is white, and the story that was being told is an Asian voices story. And so a major thing throughout this book is who is allowed to tell what story. And it really looks into the publishing industry and a lot of the issues with the publishing industry. You can really tell that a lot of it is coming from R.F. Kuang's own lived experiences and her own frustrations with the publishing industries, things that she has seen and experienced. And so that gave it a lot of life. I think it really gave it a lot of validity, I want to say, but not that it wouldn't be valid if she wasn't a successful author. But you can really just see a lot of that coming through. And it's also very funny. It is a satire, so we're in the perspective of June, who is obviously in the wrong for stealing a dead woman's manuscript and then pretending it was her own, and like really poorly navigating a lot of racial issues. Obviously she's in the wrong, but we're in her perspective, and so we see her justify it to herself and see her thought process through the whole thing, and it's very interesting. It's like the way that she just deludes herself is funny. There's a lot of humor in this book that I thought was really well done. I usually don't like any kind of social media or stuff in books to appear, but I thought that it was done really well. In this one, it was done in a way that was comedic. I think maybe that's why it came across so well, is just because it was played for comedy and like not played straight. So I thought that it came together really well. It's so different from R.F. Kuang's other work, but I think that it really works. I think that it shows her range as an author, and I think it's incredible. Yeah. And when Catabasis comes out, her new book that's coming out this year, I will be insane. So just giving you a heads up for that. I'm sure there will be some kind of content on this channel to talk about that book whenever it comes out. Yeah, so I'm gonna put these over here. A book that I didn't like, and I shouldn't say that I didn't like it, but a lot of these books that I have on my didn't like book, oh my god, a lot of these books that I have on my didn't like section, I rated like 2 to 3 stars. Like they're not horrible. I didn't hate them. And they just weren't for me, or they were disappointing to me. So one of those is Motherthing. I saw a lot about this book, especially on TikTok. I know I shouldn't get my recommendations from TikTok. I recognize that now. And I recognized it then, and I still did it because I thought that I was looking at reliable sources and I wasn't. I saw this book on a lot of the like weird girl fiction books, and I've liked a lot of weird girl fiction in the past. Don't read into that. But I really just didn't vibe with this. And again, it kind of has a haunting aspect to it. So if I'd done any amount of research, I probably would have been like, maybe this isn't for me. But it has such a beautiful cover. And it was on the Weird Girl reading list, so I was really intrigued. I didn't think that it was actually that weird. Like, I thought that most of it was pretty grounded. Up until the end, it gets kind of off the deep end. I think the worst part about it, the most bizarre part, was that she makes fish jello, or whatever. What is it called? Like, jellied salmon. And I recognize that that was probably very common in the 60s, in the post-war. Oh, I forgot to tell you what it's about. So it's about this couple and the husband's mom, who is very controlling and very maybe like abusive in the sense of like codependency and stuff. Unfortunately dies. The mother commits suicide, and so the husband is really upset in the aftermath, and the wife is having to pick everything up, like pick up the pieces after that. And so it is a pretty interesting, like, I guess the idea of it is interesting, and the way that it talks about family dynamics and this kind of nuclear family. Maybe that's where the jellied salmon comes in, is the idea of the nuclear family, kind of the 60s idea of what a woman should be, what a wife should be, and a mother. But I think that it could have been done better. I didn't really like the way that it came together. I didn't really like the writing style very much. Not really. Yeah, I just didn't like it. I don't know if I have that much more to say about it. I just wasn't, but I didn't rate it low. I think I still rated it like 2.5 or 3 stars, which is just kind of like, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad book. I understand why people like it, definitely. Whoever did the cover art is beautiful, amazing, wonderful, very talented, but I didn't really like the book. Another book I really liked is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I read this book at the beach. It was a perfect beach read. It's about this lesbian couple, and one of the wives goes on this deep sea exploration in a submarine, and then they lose connection with the shore, they lose power, and they're stuck there for like months. And the other wife, the POV alternates. I don't know to call one the main character or the other, but the one who is not at the bottom of the sea is like waiting for her to come home. So it actually starts whenever the wife has already come home, but is kind of fundamentally changed by this thing that she's been through. It goes back between Mary, who is the wife who was not at the bottom of the sea, and Leah, who was, as Leah is kind of recounting everything that happened to her in the submarine expedition, and Mary is trying to reconnect with her wife after she's been gone, after she's been changed in this huge way. And it's really wasn't what I expected. I think I expected it to be a little bit more plot heavy, a little bit more sci-fi, but it really is just about their relationship and about grief and losing a loved one and knowing when you can and can't save a relationship, knowing what's, good for the other person. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was really great. There is a little bit of deep sea horror, I would say, at the end, and I'm very terrified of the deep sea, so that was effective on me. That's the kind of horror that I like, is just like deep sea, cosmic, that kind of horror. I really enjoy it. So if you have any recommendations, obviously I don't think this book is a horror book. I think I probably cataloged it as literary fiction on my reading tracker, but it does have aspects of those genres and is really good. And you should read it if you sound interested. Another book I didn't like was Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and I do have a video talking about it with my friend Shravani, but I know none of you have seen it because it performed like shit. But so this is Ali Hazelwood's entry into fantasy, and it's specifically her entry into the Omegaverse. It's about this woman, Misery is her name, already very funny, who is a vampire and is put into this forced arranged marriage with Lark. What's his name? With Lo, the it's so embarrassing to say, the alpha wolf of the werewolf pack, but they just call them wares in this book, which just means man. I learned recently that were just means man. So they're actually calling them the human part of the word werewolf, which is fun, I guess. Yeah, but they are in an arranged marriage, and that's kind of what the book is about. And there's an evil plot going on that they have to uncover. And so that's what it's about, whatever. I kind of went into it knowing that it wasn't going to be a favorite. I kind of went into it with the, like, haha, funny, oh, it's an Omegaverse book kind of idea. And it was fun in that way. But also, I just didn't really like the plot. I just didn't really think the plot was that good. I thought that the romance was kind of underdeveloped and, like, it didn't really feel real at any point. I didn't really think that they had any kind of chemistry, or like, I don't know, I didn't feel the relationship developing. And I also just, like, I think broader strokes, just wasn't really into the plot. It was also just like a lot more, it was pretty plot heavy, and I wasn't really expecting that from a romance book, but also, like, it was just a plot that I wasn't super into. I thought there were a lot of, moving parts that we didn't really know that much about. I'm trying not to spoil anything. Also, I thought the main character was just kind of dumb. And like her whole thing is that she is a vampire, but she was raised in the human world and chose to remain in the human world as an adult, so she has no real like connection to the vampire world. And I think that is fine and it works, but it also serves in this story specifically to make her kind of a proxy for the audience, where she also like doesn't know anything about vampires and werewolves, because like the audience wouldn't know that going into the story. We don't know how this world is set up, so she also doesn't, because she's like this audience proxy. And I see it as a plot device, like I get the function of it, but I don't think that it really made a whole lot of sense in the narrative. Don't think that it really worked for the narrative, because she didn't know that much about the human world either, is the thing. So like she didn't know shit about the werewolves, she didn't know shit about the vampires, and she didn't really know shit about the humans. It's like, girl, what do you know? Tell me one thing that you do know. Another book that I liked was Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This is a classic, and I had never even really, I found this in a value store, like a thrift store, and I just kind of picked, look at that, $5. I just kind of picked it up one day and just kind of randomly, I saw that it was Virginia Woolf, and I was like, oh, I've read one of Virginia Woolf's books before. I read To the Lighthouse, and I really liked that one, so I just wanted to read another Virginia Woolf book. Again, didn't read the description, so there's a pretty major thing that happens in the middle of this book. If you've read it, you know. I had no no idea that that was gonna happen, and that was kind of fun. So I'm not gonna tell you what it was, because I kind of had a good time with that. This copy also does have some pictures in it. So the Archduchess. Wow, thank you for that picture. I love it. Yeah, so this is such a fun read. I really like Virginia Woolf's writing style. Like I said, I had read one of her books before, probably like 2 years ago. I read To the Lighthouse, and I really liked it. I think that she just has a really beautiful way with words. I think that her style is really interesting, and I find it really engrossing. I really liked reading it. It was a fun experience. I also really liked the character Orlando. I thought that he was really a good time. It is just kind of, I don't know that there is like a specific through line plot. It's kind of just about his life. And it's kind of got a little bit of a magical realist twist to it, which is of course the thing that I wasn't expecting. So I won't talk too much about it, but I really liked it. That I didn't like, I DNF'd, so this is a little bit cheating. But I didn't have enough books that I didn't like to fill up this list, so I added one that I DNF'd. I DNF'd The Fine Print by Lauren Astor. I know that this is a very popular romance book and that a lot of people really like it. It's a billionaire romance, so it's about kind of like fake Disney World. And so the female protagonist is this employee at Disney World, fake Disney World, and she wants to apply for a higher position as like an Imagineer, but the fake version. I forgot what they call it. It was something also like a silly word, but I forgot what it was. She wants to be an Imagineer basically, so she like submits a plan to revamp one of the rides at their amusement park. She does it while she's drunk, and they accept it. So, yay. That means she gets to meet the brooding, mysterious, dark-haired billionaire. And he's of course our love interest. I forgot all of their names already, so I can't tell you anything. But I also didn't finish the book, so I think I read maybe like 15 or 20%. I don't actually know. It was on an e-reader, so, but I just wasn't really into it. I think that I can't really be into the whole like billionaire room. It's just, especially when it's like Disney World, I'm like, this is kind of lame. I'm just not a Disney adult in that way. That's a joke. I'm not trying to, it's not really a Disney adult book at all. I just didn't really vibe with it. I didn't really vibe with the man character. I did like our main girly character, but not enough to keep reading. I just don't really find fake Walt Disney to be a compelling love interest for me personally. And I'm kind of over like brooding, dark, bad boys. I don't know. I'm kind of sick of them. That was a lot of power came through that. But yeah, I'm a little bit sick of them. So speaking of weird girl books, just to kind of defend myself after I said I didn't like Motherthing, I really liked Chlorine by Jade Song, and this is another like very book talk weird girl fiction. I really liked this book, and also the cover is really beautiful. Incredible, beautiful drawing, love it. So this is a book about a high school girl named Ren, and she is a swimmer on her swim team, and she starts to believe that she is actually a mermaid. And so I think that's about as much as I'm going to tell you about the plot, because it's kind of just follows her through this as she becomes more and more convinced of this. It was a lot, just kind of a heads up, a lot more graphic than I thought it would be, and included some content that I wasn't expecting to be in it. So there was a little bit of like creepiness from one of the adults in her life, just as a heads up, in case that is something you don't want to see. But I really liked it. I felt like I could really feel myself in the head of the main character, really see her perspective as she went through these changes. I really liked this book. I thought it was weird. It was appropriately weird for a weird girl book, so I do appreciate that. And I thought that it was really interesting. Yeah. Like all weird girl books, kind of speaks to something a little bit more deeply than just the plot of the book. So it kind of speaks to a feeling of belonging and finding a place where you fit in, kind of feeling ostracized and different in some unexplainable way from the rest of the people around you. And I thought that this was a really interesting way to portray that. So original, so strange, and I really liked it. A book that I did not like, unfortunately, was The Graveyard Shift by ML Rio, which sucks because this is also a beautiful cover. Really well done, really good, but I just didn't like it. And I should have fucking known because Olivia Blake's got a quote on here, and me and her have history, but yeah, I picked this book up at the airport because I was like, oh, it's so short, I can read it on the plane. And I did do that. So that's a really good story that I just told you. And I read it because I really liked If We Were Villains by the same author, and this book just didn't work for me. I just didn't really enjoy reading it. I really liked the beginning chapters. I really liked the first maybe 2-3 chapters. And then I saw all the comments on Goodreads where like the first 2 chapters were terrible. It was so overwritten and so, I don't know, pretentious. I was like, okay, damn. I think that I would have really liked the book if it were longer. I really love a novella. It's like 120 pages, so that's like a clean, short read. I love that. But I think it could have benefited from a little bit more length, just because it is a little bit more high concept, a little bit more in-depth of a plot than I think 100 pages really allows. It has a lot more characters and like backstory and moving parts than I think were adequately talked about in 100 pages. I would have liked to see a little bit more depth. I would have liked to see a little bit more character relationships and development of the plot, because it's kind of got like almost a mystery element where they're trying to figure something out. And I think that, and like the fact that it's called Graveyard Shift is like it takes place over a single night, and I think that could still work in a longer book. It would have just gone into a bit more detail, and I would have liked that more. But obviously, like, it is so short because it also takes place over a very short time period. But I think that, you know, that is something that I think that people would suspend their disbelief about, is like, oh, is this 300-page book really taking place over 12 hours? I think that people are willing to suspend their disbelief about that. Okay, I'll do 2 books that I liked, because I have too many books that I liked and not enough that I didn't like. First one is Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Saadawi, and this is a really interesting book, and I think is really interestingly constructed. So it takes place in US-occupied Baghdad, and has kind of a plethora of characters that go through the story, but one of them makes a Frankenstein's monster, and so that's kind of where the title comes from. He's using body parts of people who have been killed in bombings and like military attacks, and the way that this comes together, I think is really interesting. It kind of goes back and forth between all these characters and all these plot lines within the city, and I really loved it. I thought that it was really well done. I thought it was really, really interesting, a very interesting perspective, and that the utilization of the Frankenstein's monster was such a creative and interesting addition to that. I really loved it. Highly recommend. And another book that I really liked is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I read this book really fast. I read this book in like 2 days, and it was coming after a pretty, kind of like a slump, so that was really great for me. Piranesi is about just kind of like this little guy in a maze. He's in this like labyrinth dimension, and I guess that's kind of the premise, yeah. But I really enjoyed it. I don't want to give too much away because I think it's good to go into it not knowing anything. So it's a guy in a maze, and that's all you need to know. I really loved it. I thought the writing style was really interesting. It's also one that's kind of broken up into parts. It's written like as if it's into his diary, but also kind of not. Like you kind of suspend your disbelief that it's all written to his diary because yeah, whatever. The way that it all comes together at the end where you figure out what's going on was really interesting, really cool. I really liked the main character. I saw a lot of people, again with my reading the Goodreads reviews, I saw a lot of people saying that the beginning was hard to get into and tedious. I did not feel that way. I was hooked immediately. It's just kind of this like niche branch of fantasy that just really gripped me immediately, and so like I was in it the whole time. I do hate that they printed this sticker onto it. I wish that wasn't there. It really actually bothers me, but really good book. Really loved it. I guess my last two books are gonna be books that I am a little bit torn on, so that's actually a good thing. The first one is Fourth Wing. I have that you're actually sitting on top of the book right now, so I can't show it to you, but Fourth Wing, I was resistant to the hype for a really long time, and then people wanted me to read it for this channel, so I read it, and I think that it wasn't as bad as a lot of people made it out to be. It definitely wasn't as good as other people were making it out to be, but I really just felt like it was, and you know, I do think that I am gonna make some kind of Fourth Wing video, so stay tuned, but I am just kind of struggling to think of how to frame that and what to say because I feel like so many people have made Fourth Wing videos. I don't want to be just kind of repeating what's already been said by everybody, so I'm trying to think of something to do with that. But I guess the long and short of it is, if I had to give you a very quick explanation of why I didn't really like it, I think that I probably would have liked it when I was younger, but it's also not written for like a young audience. Like it's not written for a young audience. But the whole time I was very much like, oh, this is very divergent, like the writing style, the characters, the stakes, just kind of everything about it. It felt very YA. It felt very divergent specifically. But there were some scenes in this book that were so explicit. Like the sex scenes in this book are wildly explicit. I mean, the whole thing, the way that the characters act even is like very young. The way that they talk is very young. It just really feels like a YA book. And then there's this incredible tone shift to them like just like going at it like crazy, and that was really jarring for me. But yeah, I mean, I definitely see why people like it. It's not like, you know, it was way better than Powerless, I'll tell you that. I think that maybe I read Powerless first, and it was one of the first, I guess, TikTok romantasy books that I've read, and it set the bar so low that I read Fourth Wing and I was like, I don't know what everybody's complaining about, this was fine. Like, I really do think that Powerless did skew the curve though. So anyway, another book that I read that I don't really love, but I also didn't hate, so another just kind of mediocre book, was The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. It's honestly offensive that I put this in the same category as Fourth Wing. However, I am, because I'm kind of a little bit a little bit indifferent, where Fourth Wing I'm indifferent in a negative way. I think this book I'm indifferent in a leaning positive way. I'm positively indifferent. This is a retelling of the Iliad from the perspective of Briseis, who is, if you've read the Iliad, is Achilles' slave girl who gets taken away by Agamemnon in the very beginning. And I do think that, just like right off the bat, is very important. I think it's great to have a book from her perspective and to really look at the way that women were treated and the experience of the women in the book. I think that's really good and important. I just didn't really like the writing style. I just didn't really like the way that it was written. I just didn't think was incredible. A lot of the dialogue also really took me out of it because it was written in a way that feels pretty modern. And so I just wasn't really vibing with that. I think that maybe one of the things was just that I don't know if the writing was very immersive. There were just a lot of points where I felt that I was lacking some description, lacking a little bit of emotion. So it was a little bit harder to kind of separate the boundary between the book and like me, kind of put myself into the book and like really feel what the characters were feeling. Just like, understand the perspective a little bit more. I just didn't really love that. I didn't also love the fact that Achilles gets POV chapters in this book. I feel like we could have done without that in some way. It would have taken a little bit of finagling, but I think there was a way to make this book fully narrated by Briseis and not include his chapters. Even though like they're very plot important, I still feel like we could have gotten away with not doing him somehow. Because like, come on. The whole book is about it like being her perspective and finally giving a perspective to the women of the story, and then you're gonna give Achilles POV chapters. Anyway, yeah, those were all the books that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So let me know if you read any of the same books, have the same opinion, different opinion. I'd love to chat about it in the comments. Yeah, I'm excited to start the new year and start reading some new books. So let me know in the comments, what are your best and worst of 2024? What's on your TBR for 2025? What your goals are? Yeah, so I will see you guys in the next one, hopefully soon. But no promises. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.